3 SUVs rolled in before sunset. Someone said, "Where is she? This is our place now." I watched from Timberline Lodge, champagne sweating on the coaster. Ryan called again. "Do not stress, Mom. Only 10 of us." I opened the ranch app, heat down in the guest wing, access revoked at the side gate, rooster sequence cued for 4:30. Outside, the geese formed a line at the steps. Inside, an alpaca worked a silk tassel to threads. I did not raise my voice. I have a surprise for them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The phone kept buzzing against the linen runner. I let it hum. On my screen, the foyer cam showed white luggage skating over my Persian runner. The spare key lay exactly where Ryan had remembered it years ago, under a chipped ceramic frog Peter made in a class he pretended to hate. I could almost hear his laugh. "Careful, Marge," he would say in winter. "Do not let anyone turn your kindness into policy." I set that memory back on the shelf. The screen was enough. Ryan said, "We will take care of your place. You are rattling around that house alone." I watched a pointed heel puncture the runner's fringe. I watched a manicured hand hover over the thermostat as if it were a toy. "I am not rattling," I said. "I am retired. There is a difference." He tried the voice he uses on clients. "Mom, you have 8 empty rooms. Family wants to see where their life will happen next." 12 words. Each one heavy. 10 people. Once, and only once, I said out loud. Then I went back to the app. Guest wing set to 58 for the night, 79 for the day. Old houses have moods, I murmured. The app confirmed the side gate lock removed from their access. The barn alarm for 4:30 armed and ready, the audio stack layered years ago when Peter and I learned about coyotes and careless men. Bandit the rooster would do his part. He always did. I took a breath and let the sweet air drift over my skin. Timberline smelled like cedar and mountain soap. The ice bucket clicked again as a cube surrendered. I lifted the flute and put it down. I wanted coffee instead. A small choice is still a choice. On a split screen, the mudroom camera showed what I wanted to show them and what I needed to remind myself. The laminated taskboard gleamed under the porch light. Feed order, water check, stall muck. Fence line, eggs. A scrawl at the bottom in my hand. Early to bed, early to rise. No exceptions. It was not a threat. It was a routine. The foyer filled with voices. Someone laughed at the shoe tray. Someone shouted, "Master left." Another voice said, "Turn the heat all the way up, my hair cannot handle ranch cold." The alpaca lifted his soft head and chewed. A green string slid and slapped a bronze logo. Behind him, the geese lined the porch like ushers at a rude wedding. I felt something unclench in my chest. Not joy. Calm. The kind you earn after a year of grief and a season of studying the water table. The phone vibrated again. Ryan said, "Consider this a family soft launch. People love the content. It will help when we monetize." He paused the way he pauses when he thinks he is generous. "We will put your name on something." I answered with the slow breath Peter taught me when the oncologist said the word we pretended not to know. "Ryan," I said, "I do not shout, I schedule." My thumb swept to do not disturb. If I was going to be accused of cold, I might as well use the weather. I checked the receipts folder because the habit never leaves you. Hotel invoice in my email. Feed store order from yesterday. Replacement filters for the well. A new latch for the side barn door. I checked the county notification about the search and rescue meeting on Thursday and the weather advisory that said wind by morning. Information calms panic. Administration is a form of love when you have no patience left for begging. On the camera, the dining room door eased open, and a white sleeve reached for the light switch. The switch did nothing. I had turned off the guest wing control earlier and closed the vents last week after the first cold snap. Heat lives where work lives. That is the rule here. The kitchen camera showed the note under the coffee maker. "Welcome to a working ranch. The good coffee is in the pantry. The percolator wants patience. The pantry light will tell you if you have any." Timberline's balcony held a thin line of snow where the wind could not find it. I stepped out for a breath anyway. The quiet was clean and wide. My breath fogged and then went away. My hands did not shake. They had shaken at a funeral. They did not shake now. The lodge door side shut behind me and I pressed the fob to be sure. Control without noise. It has a sound of its own. Ryan tried again without the sales voice. Mom, it is unsafe for you to be there alone. People know you are widowed. He meant kind. He delivered threat. I looked at the glass in my hand and set it down again. I could say so many things. I could list the miles to town and the wait time for the sheriff and the names of neighbors who show up with casseroles and chainsaws before you finish dialing. I could tell him about the night Bandit chased a fox off the porch like a sheriff with spurs. Instead, I said the sentence that holds a boundary without drawing blood. You called me to take something I already have. My safety is not yours to manage. The lobby piano found a simple tune and left it hanging. I went back to the screen and pinched to zoom. In the foyer, a bag unzipped itself as if convinced it lived there. A leather belt slid, and the alpaca took it like a river reed. A hand slapped at him and he chewed faster. The camera mic picked up the wet sound. Outside, a cousin I had never met attempted to shoe the geese with a hand towel. The geese considered and refused. The sun slid. The house fell purple. The task board shone clearly now in the mudroom like a quiet subpoena. I thought of the people who loved me without words. Peter, who drew barns on napkins at chemo and taught me how to bleed radiators. Lena, who texted earlier, "Pack a bag now, do not explain," and then already had the room booked and the chocolates ordered. Tomas, who sent a one-line message when the first snow fell. "Gate latch holds. That is loyalty in ranch terms. Rise with us and you are us. Leave early and the wind will teach you manners." The phone buzzed once more. A text. Sloan sent a photo of my porch swing with the caption, "Ours now," and a row of little crowns. I did nothing. Sometimes the strongest consequence is no audience. The geese continued their slow march from the stoop to the steps. The alpaca worked the tassel until it unraveled. The foyer filled with the unease of people who expected ease. I watched like a night clerk in a small-town hotel. Calm. Awake. Recording. The room service knock came as a bird tap. The waiter wheeled in a tray and set down the silver dome with quiet hands. He asked if I was celebrating. I said I was practicing. He smiled like he understood nothing and left me with a plate and a view. I ate slowly and made a midday plan. Early bed, early alarm, check trough warmers, review the well log. Send the email to the Conservancy so my words could meet their words before too many days passed. I had already signed the trust. The deed already carried a new line with old meaning. Paper is not romance. It is mercy. The foyer camera showed Ryan stepping into the frame. He stared at the alpaca as if it were an insult crafted solely for him. He used my name like a lever. "Mom, listen. You are alone in a big property. You raised me to be practical. Practical says consolidate. Practical says come back to the city and let us manage." I heard the hint of love under the varnish of greed and refused to reach for it. He kept talking. I let him. I checked the battery levels on the outside cams. I checked the time for sunrise. I checked the rooster loop one more time. Bandit would be ready. The sweet air cut off in a soft sigh when the thermostat reached whatever the lodge prefers. The sound was exactly what I wanted to hear from my phone. I pressed the toggle for the guest wing and let the same soft sigh carry across miles into my halls. A little click. Then, stillness. I felt the choice settle inside me, the way a heavy coin settles in a jar. Small. Definite. Not loud. Enough. Boundaries can be sharp without drawing blood. They can live in settings and schedules. They can be as plain as a laminated board and as final as a soft click in the quiet. I slid the phone face down. The champagne was still there. I left it. I boiled the kettle for tea and watched the last light leave my house without me. The geese did one last pass like sentries satisfied with their shift. Inside, the alpaca found nothing left to chew. The foyer looked like a launch pad for a lesson. I did not have to teach it, morning would. The guest linens went into storage. The camp towels took their place. My hands folded cotton the way a person smooths a thought. Even from the lodge I could feel the rhythm of it. Drawer, stack, close. I toggled the guest wing to sleep temperature and felt the little yes of the app as if it had nodded back. 58 when they finally fell into bed. 79 when the sun climbed the porch rail. Old houses have moods. This one prefers discipline. I set the phone on the tray and called Lena. She did not waste breath. Kind or firm? Firm is kind, I said. She laughed like a match catching. Then be firm and go to bed early. The morning has teeth. She hung up before I could thank her. That is friendship at my age. Short, correct, Useful. The laminated board waited in the mudroom. I zoomed until the plastic sheen caught the porch light and held it like a flare. Muck stalls, feed order, water check, fence line walk, eggs. Under that a small line they would not understand yet. Tools back where you found them. I had added time blocks with a felt pen that refuses to smudge. 5, 5:30, 6. The board is a teacher without a temper. You obey or you suffer, and it never raises its voice. I opened the audio panel and checked the rooster sequence. People think roosters crow once. Bandit learned layers from Peter. We recorded him in winter when the air made his call a clean blade. I stacked it with a second track from a county fair demo and a low barn speaker that carries sound through walls. Not painful, just insistent. A pulse at 4:30, a second at 4:35, a long one at 4:40 with a break that tricks the body into hoping. Then the finish. Every morning for as long as I care to keep it, work wakes the worthy and offends the rest. I adjusted the thermostat split and watched the app translate my will into numbers. 58 in the rooms where people sleep for free. 79 in the hours when they expect comfort to drift from a vent. My room stayed steady, 70 at night, 68 by day, no drama. I earn my heat with feed and forms and the kind of paper that locks a door a decade after you are gone. Tomas texted from the cottage. All set on the latch. Buck followed with a thumbs up and a picture of a row of buckets filled and lined like soldiers. They do not need direction most days. Tonight they wanted permission to ignore and let work speak. I wrote one phrase, let the board teach. They understood. I built a small pile of proofs on my screen the way I sort mail on a kitchen island. Receipts from the feed store, the lodge folio, a reminder from the county about burn permits and the next meeting about water rights, a quick note to myself to label the spare headlamps. Organization is not a personality, it is a climate. It takes shape around you if you keep it honest. I put the phone on the balcony railing and listened for a minute, the kind of wind that moves branches but not plans. Far off, a truck rolled through the pines and faded. In the foyer camera, a white bag tumbled and righted itself like a calf learning legs. The alpaca watched with interest and then lost it. He is gentle. He likes fringe and attention. That is not a crime. I whispered a promise to myself. Water at dawn. Fresh hay mid-morning. Supervision until they learn a new rhythm in the house. I am not cruel. I am exact. The pantry cam showed the percolator set out with a note in my hand. Fill to the line. Wait until the hiss settles. Do not rush. Patience has a flavor. The good coffee sat behind a crate of pears Peter canned 3 summers ago, a kind of treasure hunt for adults who call themselves guests and behave like tourists. If they find it, they earn it. If they give up, they drink what they deserve. I opened the contact list and tapped the Daltons. No call tonight, just a draft text I might send tomorrow. Sunday plans still on. We have shade and a spare grill. Bring what you wish and leave with less worry. Community is a quiet weapon. Reputation carries farther than any alarm. The foyer camera picked up voices again. A young man asked if animals could be moved for lighting. Someone said this will look great on the story. I watched a hand reach toward the alpaca and pause when he blinked his slow blink. Geese tested the doormat and then lined up like a committee. I felt nothing sharp. Only the thud of a boundary setting itself in the earth where you would put a post. I wiped a fingerprint from my screen with the edge of a napkin. The to-do list for the morning wrote itself in my head like a prayer. Check trough warmers and the line on the well. Walk the fence by the cottonwoods. Quiet talk with Tomas about the south gate. Call the conservancy and confirm the wording on the stewardship clause. Make tea strong and drink it too hot. Then let the day do what day does. The alarm sequence waited in its little gray box. I tapped once to preview and felt the faint thrum of sound through the speaker in the phone. It made a memory open. Peter in a wool cap in July because chemo does not read calendars. He stood by the coop with his hand on the latch and said what he always said when I fought back tears. Teach the morning to do the talking. Then he opened the door and Bandit leapt to the rail like a small general. Permission granted. Order restored. I blinked and was in the lodge again, and my feet were warm on the carpet that felt like river moss. Lena texted a photo of a kettle and 2 cups on her counter. Boil now, sleep after. Call me at 6. I wrote back one word, ready. I am not a woman who asks for rescue. I am a woman who writes the plan and then lets it work. It took me decades to learn the difference between control and consent. Tonight I give the house consent to be what it is: hard, beautiful, ungrateful to the lazy. I checked the mudroom board one last time. The words were plain, the order was fair. I added a small star next to water because people do not understand that water is everything until it is nothing. I capped the pen and set it back in the tray under the board where it belongs. My hands did that long before my phone showed it. Muscle memory across miles. The room service tray carried a pot of decaf I did not ask for, and a dish of lemon peels that looked like small moons. I pushed both aside and filled the kettle. Steam rose and curled and vanished, a small ceremony in a borrowed kitchen. When the phone lit with movement, I let it show me everything and nothing. Faces, shoes, a hand tugging a drawer where I keep nothing worth a quarrel. The edge of a champagne cage skittering under a chair. No one looked at the board. People do not respect what does not shout. In the morning it will not need to. I shortened my world to 3 rectangles: foyer, mudroom, kitchen, like a control room in a decent hospital. Hear the monitors, trust the nurses. Do not perform an operation you can schedule for dawn. I turned off every notification that offered me a feeling and left on every one that offered me a fact. Battery level. Motion at the gate. Temperature drift. The camera feeds bloomed and steadied until each frame felt like a held breath. Lena called back without preface. "I'm setting my alarm for 5. Do you want me to bring coffee or outrage?" "Bring coffee and a coat," I said. "Outrage will arrive on its own." She exhaled in a way that meant she could see my face in her head. "Then we will let the board do the sermon." I smiled into the phone. "Work is a teacher, Lena." She said what she always says when I climb onto a high truth. "Try to sleep, Pastor." She clicked off. I stood on the balcony again for the last check of the wind. The pines answered with a low body sound and then went still like a choir waiting for the downbeat. The sky over the ridge held a thin milk color that means a flat morning and good footing. I reserve the weather for later. Tonight I only borrow the air to rinse my thoughts. Inside the suite I dim the lights to calm my foolish nerves. It is not fear. It is the shock of being underestimated by your own child. That pain is private and slow. It does not belong to the cameras. It belongs to a kettle and 2 hands and a long inhale. I let it pass like a small storm and reach clear air again. On the screen the alpaca settled. The geese lowered their heads and found the rhythm of night. A suitcase leaned against the bench where I tie my boots. A coat fell in a careless heap where I set Peter's hat. I did not flinch. I set the phone face down as if I were closing a book at a cliff. The story would still be there when the light returned. I turned the lock on the balcony door and felt the same soft click the guest wing would feel in a minute when the system executed my schedule. There is a mercy in automation. It removes the tremor from the hand. It turns a no into a switch that anyone can hear. Somewhere down the mountain the lodge generator took a breath and settled. Somewhere on my land the fridge compressor did the same. My house and I share a heartbeat when I let it. I washed my cup and set it where it dries fastest. I laid out the clothes I wear when things go wrong and when they go right. The same boots, the same coat, the same gloves with a patch in the palm. I put the phone on the nightstand and charged it like a small animal in from the cold. I let my eyes close and saw the board one more time in my head. Muck, feed, water, fence, eggs, teach. Then sleep found me like an honest debt being paid. He drew a barn and pencil on chemo days. I inked it. That is how we built a life that weather does not bully. Pencil for hope, ink for promise. Tonight I set the leather binder on the desk and let my fingers learn it again. The spine is rubbed smooth where his thumb lived. The corners are darkened by years of moving it from kitchen to truck to courthouse to kitchen again. It smells like saddle soap and printer ink. It smells like us. I do not rush paper. I square the stack with my palm until the edges behave. The desk lamp warms the wood in a small circle and makes the room outside of it disappear. In the circle, I am a woman with a task. Outside of it, there are people who forgot their manners on my porch. Inside the circle, there is order. First, the inventory that proves what is where, then the insurance that pays when nature takes her fee, then the deed that says the ground says my name, and will keep saying it when I am gone through the trust we signed without fanfare. I mention each in my head only once, and place each where it will not be lost to a sudden knock at the door. Peter made lists even when his hands shook. He had neat handwriting before the drugs, and then stubborn handwriting after. The inventory laughs in his voice. 2 galvanized waterers by north fence, 3 spare hoses coiled under workbench, 1 ridiculous rooster named Bandit who thinks he pays the mortgage. He added that last part on a day we did not have room for jokes. I am grateful he made room anyway. It is hard to be angry with a man who can find a line of light in a narrow hall. The binder opens to the section he loved best. Drawings. Not blueprints, not fancy. Just pencil lines that know the feel of a thing. A stall wall where a skittish mare will not catch a hip. A shelf in the tack room at the right height for a tired back. A window that throws morning across feed like a blessing. On a page torn from a drugstore pad, he drew the barn the way he wanted it if we had money and time in the same year. I traced those lines after he fell asleep. Later, I took them to a contractor and said, build this with whatever the budget can stand and leave the rest to me. He did. Between the studs, Peter's pencil still lives. I keep one memory close and let the others rest, because a heart cannot carry a parade every night. The memory is small and practical. A bad Tuesday in February. He came home from a treatment that made his bones ring. Snow kept throwing itself against the kitchen window like a bored child. He sat at the table and unfolded himself the way old men do, even though he was not old. He put the binder down and said, let's draw the day we want. He passed me a pencil and we drew a routine like the ones I keep now on a board for people who dislike order until it saves them. 5. Feed. 5:30. Waterline check. 6. Coffee. 6:15. A walk to see if the fence wants to argue. 7. Books. He meant accounting because the ranch does not forgive creative math. 8. Rest if earned. I wrote that last line. He let me keep it. I turned to the page he filled the week he finally admitted mornings would outlive him. There is a smear where his thumb dragged. There is a margin note I had not seen until the light hit it from this angle. If he will not listen, the mornings will. He meant our son. He meant any man who confuses inheritance with entitlement. He meant the way a pre-dawn wind carries its own lessons if you meet it with boots and not excuses. I press my hand to the margin like I can borrow his heat. I do not cry. Tears make everything harder to read. I take the deed out and set it on the blotter. A line runs through it that was not there before and will not be erased by a raised voice at holiday dinner. Title transferred to the trust that carries our name, but cannot be crowded by anyone's plans for quick profit. That is all I will say about it here. Paper is private and heavy and does not need applause to do its work. I slide the deed back into the sleeve and move on. I count the insurance pages the way I count heads in the pasture. I do not love the counting. I love what it gives me. A breath I do not owe anyone. A quiet yes when crisis wants to be the only voice in the room. Flood, fire, theft, words with teeth. I keep enough teeth of my own to answer them. The premium is a number that sits tidy on the ledger. The coverage sits calmer in my chest than any speech I could make to a group of tired people who mistake a free bed for a right to narrate my life. I turn to the inventory again and let my eyes scan for gaps. 2 chainsaws. One will not start below 10 degrees. I write a note to place it by the stove in a pinch so the oil does not thicken. 4 headlamps. Replace batteries. 1 bag of chicken feed opened and clipped. 2 unopened. I imagine a young cousin reading the word clip and thinking of social feeds. I picture Bandit reading it and thinking of tripping a stranger for sport. I add another note to pick up a new box of contractor bags because Mud and family tend to travel as a set. On the corner of the desk sits a photo in a simple frame. Peter in a hat that would embarrass the city and a grin that would redeem it. I speak to him the way widows speak when they are alone and honest. You built the ribs. I will keep the spine. It is not poetry. It is a marching order. The lamp hums as if it agrees. The room around me breathes slow. A baseboard tick. The faintest scent of a match struck and gone. I run my thumb along the stitching of the binder and feel the places I have had to mend. Leather does not complain when you stitch it well. It accepts the thread as if it was always there. A marriage can be like that if you respect the bind more than the show. We did. I am still bound to the work we charted when we believed we had more time than we did. I think of Ryan because I must. I let the thought pass through like weather. He is not a villain. He is a man who learned speed as a language and expects land to keep pace. Land does not sprint. It leans and waits and demands a body you cannot hire out when the road closes. If he will not listen, the mornings will. The note sits under my hand like a blessing and a dare. I slide a blank sheet into the binder. Not a journal, not a poem, a plan. Tomorrow before I drive home, I will sign the letter that finishes what we started. I will confirm the stewardship language with the Conservancy so even a clever lawyer cannot wiggle a loophole into the pasture. I will catalog the small losses from tonight in a separate file for insurance if I need it, and for memory if I do not. I will leave the rest to the board and the dawn. The house is quiet except for the lamp. I stand and kiss my fingertips and touch them to the top of the frame, because that is how I pray when words are tired. I stack the papers in order so any stranger could find what matters without my help. Deed, insurance, inventory. The binder swallows them with a sound that satisfies something deep in me, the kind of click that makes a body stand taller without knowing why. I check the time and do not check the cameras. I have done enough watching for one night. The structure is in place. The teacher is ready. The lesson will begin when the sky grays. If a boy cannot hear his mother, he may someday hear his own breath in cold air and understand the difference between want and worth. Peter knew that with a certainty that survived him. I borrow his certainty now like a tool from a pegboard and set it down where it will be easy to reach in the morning. I reach for the lamp. The switch is a little dome that fits my finger like a decision. The room waits for the yes. I give it. The desk lamp clicks off. The binder snaps shut. No traps, just truth with edges. That was the rule I carried downstairs with my boots in one hand and the phone in the other. The lodge hallway was quiet enough to hear carpet breathe. I called Tomas before the elevator doors met. He answered on the first ring. You sure? Yes. Reality can host. We spoke like people who have worked storms together. Short, exact. He would check the side lot for loose tools and move anything sharp behind the tack room door. He would leave halters visible and nothing else inviting. Buck would walk the yard once, pull the garden hose into a neat coil, and hang it where even a sleepy guest could not trip. I asked him to place the orange cones at the barn entrance, not as a barricade, as a suggestion. Good fences begin as good hints. In the mudroom camera, the wall space beside the task board looked bare and honest. I opened the file I keep for things that make lawyers sleep and wrote the house rules placard. No trespass past the board without a hat and boots. Animals may approach. Do not chase. Water is rationed during dry weeks. No drains left running. In an emergency call, the number printed at the bottom before calling anyone else. Not because I am controlling. Because I know who has the gate keys and who can arrive within 15 minutes when a latch fails. I added a single line that tasted like metal. By entering, you accept basic ranch risk. It is not a threat. It is an acknowledgement that gravity is undefeated. I sent the file to Buck with a message. Print bold, laminate. Screw to the wall at eye level with 2 anchors. He sent back an okay and a photo of a drill on the mudroom bench. I could smell the plastic when I looked at it. I could almost hear the little whine it makes before the screw bites and commits. The elevator delivered me to the lobby where the night clerk pretended not to notice my boots. I stepped into the cold and let it stiffen my spine. Timberline held that clean dark you only get at altitude. A truck down the road shifted gears and then settled. I called Jim Dalton as I walked the circle drive. He picked up with the sound of a screen door closing behind him. We traded the old currency of rural neighbors. Weather, water, work. I said the word potluck as a question. He laughed softly. Dolly already has 2 casseroles and a cake. We are coming Sunday anyway. Thought we would make it official. A potluck is food on paper plates. It is also a mirror. People show you who they are when they pass dishes and ask what you do with land. I felt the small turn inside me that means a plan just gained a public. I did not invite a trial. The county brought one to my yard in the shape of neighbors who care without needing permission. Good. Let them come. Let the house be polite but not soft. Let the work line up where anyone can see it. I crossed the parking lot to the quiet edge and called Lena. She answered with the sound of water boiling. Sunday is now a crowd, I said. She liked that. People behave better in the open. Bring the truth. Let them set their own table with it. Then she asked again. Kind or firm? Firm is kind, I said. She told me to sleep as if sleep were a chore on a list, and hung up. Back at the desk in my room, I checked the mudroom camera. Buck stood there with a level and a pencil tucked behind his ear. The placard went up straight as a plumb line. He stepped back and took a photo that caught both signs in one frame. The board and the rules, order and responsibility. I saved the image to a folder labeled Optics because sometimes people need pictures to learn what words cannot carry. I sent Thomas one more instruction. Put the spare headlamps under the placard in a shallow bin. Label them Take One with a marker. If they want to enter the morning, they will have light. If not, the bin will still look like welcome and orders sharing a sentence. He replied with a single word. Done. I walked down to the lodge back lot where the generator shed sits like a square promise. The metal latch met my palm and clicked in that specific way metal makes when it knows its job. Diesel bloom met the cold air and put a stripe of work through the night. I do not love diesel, but I love what it means. Prepared, not performative. Enough fuel to carry the lines if the wind gets clever at 3 a.m. I let the scent settle into my coat and then I let it go. The lodge hum joined the larger mountain hum and my head cleared. On the way back, I drafted the message I would send to Ryan in the morning if he asked for the rulebook. 2 sentences. House rules are posted in the mudroom. The board runs the rest, clean and bloodless. I deleted the draft. He would learn more by walking past a sign than reading one on his phone, while inventing reasons it did not apply to him. The foyer camera caught movement I did not need to know. I refused the bait. I turned my attention to optics I could control. In the kitchen, I asked Tomas to set a pitcher of water and a stack of clean cups by the sink. Hospitality without performance. Beside the cups, he placed a simple timer and a card. Run sink 1 minute, then stop. Well, recharge. People believe paper more than lectures when thirst and plumbing are involved. He set a dish of seed by the back door with a card that said geese are territorial. Offer distraction, not a chase. Bandit does not care for theater. There is mercy in telling the truth before a misunderstanding gets legs. Buck texted a second photo. 2 folding chairs on the porch facing the pasture. Not for guests to watch entertainment. For older neighbors to rest their knees during potluck plates. He had set them slightly apart so the conversation would settle there without getting in the way of work. I wrote thank you and meant it with my whole chest. It matters to plan for the people who already hold your name with care. The phone showed a new tile in the app. Community. I had built it without realizing it. The Daltons. Tomas and Buck. Lena on a city block with 2 mugs waiting. Peter, in a margin note. The board and the placard were only invitations to a chorus that already knew its song. I brewed tea and took it out to the balcony. The cup held heat like a small oath. Down the mountain, the wind gathered itself and slowed the way a horse settles when a hand rests on its neck. The lodge railing was cold against my forearms. I watched a single snowflake make up its mind and drop. Whatever theater was happening in my foyer could not follow me out here. That is the luxury I allow myself. A door closed, a breath owned. My last call went to Dolly because she sees what men miss and then tells them kindly. She answered with the sound of something in the oven. I told her Sunday might include a few folks with city habits and sharp phones. She asked one question. Are you ready for the eyes? I said yes. Reality can host. She liked that answer. Then she said the thing I was waiting for. We will bring the generator and the big coffee urn. No one behaves their worst with a hot cup in the hand. I told her about the placard. She said good. Let the land speak first and the paper second. When we hung up, I walked the room once to make sure nothing essential had shifted. Coat on the chair, phone on the charger, binder on the desk where memory stays safe. I opened the app and watched the tiles bloom across the screen. Kitchen, mudroom, foyer, barn aisle, south gate, each one steady and unremarkable. The noise of other people's urgency could not drown a grid that simple. I imagined Sunday without fear. Trucks easing onto gravel, Dolly passing plates. Jim asking Ryan what his grazing plan was with a voice that sounded like a compliment until you answered wrong. Sloan taking a photo and finding that the frame kept catching signs instead of scenes. Someone calling Bandit handsome and learning he prefers respect to flattery. Neighbors talking about snowpack and wells and the first cutting. A question about subdividing landing in the air like a marble on a wood floor. Clear, hard, rolling toward whoever had brought it into the room. The wind lifted and then eased. I let the sound wash over the last bit of worry clinging to my ribs. Community is a mirror. If you are brave enough to stand in front of it, you do not need to shout to be seen. I finished the tea and set the cup down where the ring would not mark anything important. The balcony door closed with a soft seal that sounded like consent. I lay down and pulled the blanket to my throat and let the quiet tell me what to do next. Sleep. Wake. Let the board teach. Let the placard do the welcome. Let the neighbors bring sunlight to corners where shadows breed talk. Let Sunday happen like weather. It will show us who wants to live here and who wants only to pose. The generator sighed one last time and settled into its faithful murmur. Diesel and pine shared the air. I smiled in the dark because the plan had edges, and I did not have to hold them all night. Hospitality isn't a birthright. It's a budget line. I said it once in my head and let the numbers run my hands. The phone woke to its quiet grid. I did not need speeches. I needed switches. Guest wing systems came up first. The thermostat wheel glowed like a small moon. My thumb gave it a careful nudge and watched it settle exactly where I had told it to live. Enough for safety. Not enough for comfort without effort. The app confirmed the schedule I had already set. I did not admire my work. I moved on. Pantry access was next. A simple metal hasp and a code cabinet behind the broom. I watched Tomas on the mudroom camera slide the hasp into place and test it twice. He tucked the code card where only I would reach without thinking. We are not starving anyone. We are ending grazing as a hobby. Buck lifted 2 crates of shelf goods and placed them on the open shelves like a decoy. Oats. Crackers. Canned pears with a date that still makes my chest warm. The good coffee stayed exactly where patients could find it. The guest Wi-Fi tile pulsed on the screen as if it expected a conversation. I pushed it into off and watched the icon dim. The office network stayed alive under its boring name. One carries work. One carries noise. I have learned the cost of both. The television in the family room blinked with a splash screen that wanted logins and promises. I backed it out to an empty input and left a laminated card on the console. Local channels only. Storm news. Road closures. The things that matter arrive without a password. I opened the lock manager and scrolled to the side gate. The system offered updates. I gave it one. App check-in required for entry. Code access disabled. Notifications to me if someone tries 3 times. No drama. Just a key that requires a hand I have not offered. I ran the test from my end and watched the gate think and then say no. That is the sound a boundary makes when you teach it to speak. Buck came up on the kitchen camera with a stack of towels under one arm and a small toolkit under the other. He set the towels where they belong and stood in the doorway until the hallway settled around him. If they ask, "We're conserving." He nodded once like a man who understands a sentence that is larger than the words in it. He walked to the laundry room and checked the valve I always worry about when company gets brave. He turned it a 1/4 inch toward respect and left it. On the porch, he hung a small enamel pot under the hand pump as a reminder that not every tap is a lake. He placed a folded note beside it. Run and stop. Count slower than your impatience. He did not sign his name. The whole place knows his handwriting by now. I moved to vehicles because I have been a wife and a mother long enough to know that cars can start trouble when people feel stuck. The remote for the garage lives in a drawer that used to hold takeout menus in another life. I watched Tomas place it in the safe and close the steel mouth. I changed the opener code and sent myself an email so I would not trust memory alone. I could hear Peter cluck in my ear. Trust ink, not nerves. He was right then. He is right now. The spare bedroom across from my office holds a lockbox I bought when the first contractor left a tape measure under my sink. It is not fancy. It holds passports and a handful of small things that talk louder than you want them to if a stranger shakes them. I had Buck put the lockbox under the bed and slide a plain storage bin where it had been. When you take away access, you owe whoever lives there clarity. Yes, here. No, there. Try again. Sloan texted a photo of a charcuterie board spread on my kitchen island like an apology made of cheese. No caption. I did not answer. I watched the island camera and saw hands reach for knives without asking where I keep them. Buck stood at the edge of the frame and moved the blades to a cutting board and left a dish towel where a hand would find it. We are not animals here even when we host them. In the app, I found the water heater settings for the guest wing and confirmed the off hours I prefer when a house needs to think about wells and not whims. I did not twist anything new. I only made sure the logic held. The wheel on the screen looked like a coin set into the face of a clock. It reminded me that money and time speak the same language if you let them. I opened the power manager for exterior lights and trimmed the window so the porch would be kind and the yard would stay honest. Enough light to see a misstep. Enough dark to see the sky. People think light is generous. Sometimes darkness is the only gift that keeps a person quiet long enough to hear what a place is saying. I stood up and stretched the way Peter taught me when a long task ends and another begins. The lodge carpet gave under my heels like good soil. I checked the camera at the side gate again. Sloane's cousin pushed it with 2 fingers and made a face when it refused to know him. He looked around like a boy caught in a pantry. The notification reached me on a whisper. 3 tries. Access denied. I let the whisper pass. A lock is not an accusation. It is a sentence that begins and ends without an argument. Tomas called for a last check before he and Buck took their boots off. We walked through the list like pilots who expect the weather to turn. House rules placard mounted in straight, headlamps labeled under it. Task board clean and shining. Pantry hasp secure. Garage remote secured. Side gate check-in active. He waited. Anything else? No. Go home. Sleep. He said the thing he says when a hard day waits. We will be early. He hung up. I took a breath and went looking for anything in me that wanted to make a speech. There was nothing there. The older I get, the more I trust lists. They do not gossip. They do not ask for applause. They click and hold. A woman who can live with that sound has already said what needs saying. On the foyer camera, Ryan paced with the posture of a man who tailors billboards for his own mind. He touched the thermostat and the screen smiled and did nothing. He tried the side door and the smart lock held its ground. He turned to the main hall and found the placard. His mouth moved as he read for the first time a language he has avoided. Risk. Water. Boots. The words did not argue with him. He looked smaller the longer he stood there. He put a hand to the wall, like a man steadying himself on a moving train. I did not feel triumph. I felt the good fatigue that comes when a fence line is finally tight. The lodge heater sighed and the room found a temperature that would stay put without me. I set the phone to Do Not Disturb and placed its screen down on the table as if I were laying a book to rest. Boundaries enforced by settings outlast arguments. I set it to no one, and to the girl I used to be who always thought one more sentence could rescue a man from himself. The suite went soft around the edges. A distant door clicked in the hall. Somewhere below, a cart wheeled past with a rattle like spoons in a drawer. I washed my hands at the sink and let the water run as long as the sign in my kitchen allows. Run and stop. I counted slower than my impatience. I dried my hands on a plain towel and folded it in half and then in half again. The act felt like a small benediction over the day I had just taken back from other people's plans. I lay down and let the quiet count me backward. 10. The side gate knows me and no one else. 9. The garage obeys only the hands I taught it. 8. The pantry offers food but not a feast for a phone. 7. The guest wing systems speak my language whether anyone likes the accent. 6. The board will teach at dawn and I will not interrupt. 5. The placard will tell the truth without pointing a finger. 4. The neighbors will bring Sunday and the mirror it carries. 3. Tomas and Buck will be early because they always are. 2. Bandit will call the hour the way Peter taught him. 1. I will meet the morning after the settings have done what words could not. You wanted real. Meet morning. At 4:30, the first crow cut the dark like a seam ripper. Bandit hit his mark again at 4:35, then a longer call at 4:40 that lifted the house to a hover and dropped it. The alarm stack did what paper promised. The cameras showed the guest wing stirring like a nest poked with a stick. Sloane flailed under a blanket and lost a heel to the floor. Someone knocked into a luggage tower and buried a cousin to the shin. Outside the porch lamp held a small circle of frost. The geese took positions along the steps shoulder to shoulder the way big men stand at a club door. Inside the foyer, Paco and Luna drifted like furry tugboats. A silk tassel caught and pulled and trailed behind an alpaca like green confetti. The Persian runner accepted footprints and then surrendered to a slick. In the kitchen, a drawer slammed 3 times before anyone found a spoon that matched a hand. Ryan called while the rooster held a long note. There are animals everywhere. His breath hit the mic like wind through a paper bag. Halters. Barn. You will do fine. I kept my voice smooth as a winter pond. He tried again. How do I? You will do fine. The cameras worked like a conductor. Mudroom. Buck's rubber muck boots lined in a neat row like a liturgy. No one put them on. A cousin tried to shoo a goose with a plaid dish towel. The goose read the towel as a weak flag and charged. The cousin backed into the wall and left a chalk smear of fear with his shoulder. Sloane chose the foyer mirror and a lipstick the color of a fruit not found in this county. Paco nosed the tube and tested the wax with his teeth. She shrieked when the cap disappeared. Bandit crowed a third time as if to sign the scene with a flourish. A micro breath opened and I took it. Pre-dawn blue seeped along the ridge like a careful spill. The lodge window held a reflection of my face I did not recognize at first because it looked rested. I set the kettle on and watched the glass fog and clear twice. The air held that pencil snap cold that wakens the old and makes the young complain. I let it in and then shut it out, back to the feeds. Ryan learned the language of latches on the fly. He found a halter because Buck left it in the obvious place. He braced Ranger's jaw with fingers that did not yet know their job. The horse considered him, and the way his breath rattled. Ranger blew warm air down his cheek like a sermon no one asked for. Ryan steadied, a small yes inside me. He led badly. Ranger forgave him for trying. Luna found a handbag and dragged it 2 graceful feet before Sloane wrestled it back and inspected the drool as if it were acid. She lifted the bag by 2 fingers and looked around for someone to blame, and found only a placard at eye level about boots and water and responsibility. The sign did not meet her eyes. It did not need to. She flung the bag onto the bench and smacked a light switch that had already been told to rest. The house heard the temper and did nothing. The kitchen discovered the percolator. A cousin poured grounds to the rim. Another filled the kettle to the top. The note sat where I left it. Fill to the line. Wait until the hiss settles. Do not rush. They rushed. The first cup tasted like surrender and dirt. They tried to find a screen to argue with, and discovered the guest wing systems were not interested in their opinion. One got a strip of service at the porch rail and held his phone to the sky like an offering. The cold took the offer, and the phone gave up its last bar. Bandit announced 5 with a clipped syllable that sounds like the start of a joke if you do not know farm time. The house took the sound like a command. A man who had never moved hay lifted a square bale a 1/4 inch and announced a weight estimate no one needed. Another slid open a pantry shelf and met the hasp like a closed fist. He rattled it and learned that metal does not negotiate before daylight. I watched his shoulders sag and imagined the story he would tell later that makes him important again. For now, the board told him to carry water, and he chose a mug. I answered once more when Ryan's number rose again. There is a goose on the porch. He sounds organized. Geese have a union, I said. Feed solves most meetings. Where is the feed? Barn. The word carried all the letters of his childhood and none of its ease. You will do fine. In the barn aisle, Ranger swung his head and knocked a shoulder that needed humbling. Juniper tossed her tail and stared down a man who wanted to take shortcuts. Tomas had left 2 lead ropes thrown loose over a rail like an invitation. Ryan took one. The cousin took the other by the middle and learned why a loop is safer than a fist. He made it 3 paces before Juniper corrected him with a step on his boot toe. He yelped, and then laughed too loud like a man in front of a camera that is not there. The cows in the next pasture lowed an opinion and returned to their grass. Inside the house, Sloane went searching for heat. The thermostat smiled a mild no. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and dragged it like a cape and left a trail of embroidery thread across the hallway. Paco found a stray tassel and followed like a child with a kite. She turned her face to the foyer cam without knowing it and softened her mouth the way she does for strangers online. The alpaca blinked behind her like a truth she did not want in the frame. The kettle sang at the lodge and I poured careful. Tea tastes better when the day is about to bruise you. I held the cup like a small animal and listened for my house under the rooster and the shoes and the voices. Houses have hearts if you let them. Mine beat steady. The lodge heater exhaled like a sleeping dog, and the pre-dawn blue deepened toward real sky. At 5:30, the task board took custody of the morning. Muck, feed, water, fence, eggs. A hand pointed, and a cousin read each line out loud in the voice of a 6th grader who thought he could talk a teacher into changing an assignment. The board did not blink. He found a broom and held it like a sword, and then discovered gravity and stall corners and the science of aiming your effort. He lasted 5 minutes before he traded the broom for a phone and the phone for nothing. On the porch, the geese reviewed the line and let one man pass after he offered seed like a bribe. They closed ranks again and adjusted their necks in unison like ushers. A woman tried to slip past and met a hiss that felt personal. She returned to the door and looked for help, and saw the rubber muck boots under the bench. She stepped into a pair over bare feet and winced and went anyway. It was the bravest thing she did all day. I tucked that away. People surprise you if you leave room. Ryan got Ranger to the back deck and then faced the problem of stairs. The horse considered the drop like a philosopher. No, a problem you cannot sell yourself out of. Ryan tried to coax and then to command. Ranger flicked an ear and gave the answer Peter used to give me when I tried to skip steps. Wrong order, try again. Ryan led him back through the kitchen where the percolator had finally found its voice, and the coffee smelled like a second chance. A cousin cheered as if he had just invented patience. A micro-breath opened and I watched the east bleed gold behind the cottonwoods. I could hear the silence under the noise. My father used to say, quiet carries further than a scream if you are patient. He was not a rancher, but he understood mornings. I finished my tea and set the cup on the sill and let my shoulders drop a notch. The alpacas drifted to the slider and watched the yard as if it were television. Sloane stood 10 feet back with her arms folded and the blanket like a toga. She spoke to Ryan without moving. This is insane. He did not look up. The halter buckle caught and held, and he breathed out like a man who had been given a job and not a stage. He touched Ranger's neck with the flat of his hand, and the horse dropped his head an inch. That inch mattered. I allowed myself one glance at the guest wing systems tile. It sat there quiet and obedient and told me nothing new. Good. I did not need more. I needed daybreak and a list. The last beat of the montage arrived all at once. A goose decided the porch chair needed a new position and dragged it 3 inches across the boards. A cousin took a step into a puddle and discovered that leather soles and farm mornings do not share a treaty. Bandit hopped to the top rail and announced 6 with a crisp brag. The pasture shrugged and took the light. The house stood still and made everyone inside visible. Ryan called a final time. The voice was lower and less sure. What next? The board, I said. Feed order. Water check. Fence walk. Eggs. Halters back where you found them. He did not argue. The line clicked. The lodge room held stillness like a full cup. I packed my bag with the slow care of a woman who will drive home after the morning has taught the first lesson. I slid the phone into my pocket and felt its weight as a vow. I looked once more at the feed. In the mudroom, Buck's boots waited under the bench like punctuation. Work removes entitlement's varnish. A person becomes a person again when their hands forget the camera. I opened the door to the balcony and let the wide quiet of pre-dawn blue pass through me like a cure. Then I went to meet the day. 15 pickups arrived. No one brought judgment, just casseroles and questions. The gravel took their weight like a kind old back. Dolly hopped down first with a cooler and a smile that could fix a fence. The Daltons set a long plank across sawhorses for a table and spread an oilcloth with strawberries the size of thumbs. Someone plugged a coffee urn into the portable generator. The hum settled like a bass note under talk. A child carried a stack of paper plates like treasure. The air smelled like beans and smoke and something sweet with cinnamon. I stood at the porch rail and felt the day change shape. This was no audience for a show. It was a room without walls where people mean what they ask. Jim lifted a foil pan and tipped his hat to no one in particular. Ryan hovered near the steps trying to decide if he belonged. Sloane adjusted her sleeve and found a smile that worked on cameras but not on Dolly. The cousins stood in a cluster and looked everywhere except at the task board. Jim unrolled a county map on his tailgate and set a salt shaker at one corner and a jar of pickles at the other so the wind would not take it. His fingers knew the boundaries the way a hand knows a family face. He tapped the creek and the cottonwoods and the rise where snow lingers late. The map did not care about trends. It showed its ribs and invited you to learn them. Plates found hands, questions found ears. A man from the next ridge asked what my water looks like in August and nodded when I said it depends on May. Dolly wanted to know if the hens are laying better since I changed feed and smiled when I said that Bandit will take credit either way. A young neighbor with a new baby asked how the wind treats the west fence, and I told her to brace corners and forgive the rest. No laughter at anyone, only the steady exchange that keeps a place fed. Ryan drifted closer, drawn by Jim's hat and the way men make a circle without trying. He peered at the map and squinted like a student who wants to skip to the answer key. Jim traced the center pasture with a calloused finger. Good grass there if you rotate right. He lifted his eyes to Ryan as if offering a tool. How do you plan to handle grazing? Ryan cleared his throat and borrowed a voice that usually sells marble countertops. We will need to subdivide pieces for liquidity. He said the word like a key that opens every door. The wind stopped for a second that felt like an hour. Jim's hand stayed on the map, but the hand changed. Dolly's smile turned into something still. The generator hum sounded louder. A paper plate lifted and caught air and then sat down again as if embarrassed. Stewards do not cut land for parts, Jim said. He did not raise his voice. He did not move his hand. The sentence fell into the dust and stayed there. Ryan looked at the jars holding the map. He looked at me. He looked at the porch floor as if a trap might open. I felt the pinch under my ribs that comes when pride meets a brick wall. I love my son. I do not love the way he hears money where other people hear roots. A neighbor from 2 gates over stepped into the pause like a man who knows first aid. He pointed at the floodplain line and asked if I had ever seen the creek take the lower field. I told the story of a spring when Peter and I spent a week moving fence posts by hand while the cows watched with a kind of pity. The group smiled because they knew the humor in that pity. The map lay between us like a truth that would outlast all of us. I moved closer to Jim and ran a finger along the place where my north fence meets the Dalton line. The paint there has faded to the color of old sage. He heard you, I said, quiet so only the rail and the wind could be witnesses. Jim nodded like a man who understands that hearing and listening live in different houses. Dolly handed Sloane a plate with beans and cornbread and a square of cake that tasted like something your grandmother made to heal a day. Sloane tried to eat without letting her fingers touch the food and almost dropped the fork. Dolly steadied her hand with a touch that felt like a mercy. We are plain here, she said, not unkind. Sloane managed a bite and a thank you, and then folded herself smaller. The cousins broke formation and tried to fit in by praising the sky. The sky ignored them. A boy asked how far to town, and a girl asked where the best reception is, and the nearest coffee that shares photos. Jim pointed to the map and then to the horizon. You get bars up on the ridge if you stand by the oldest cottonwood and face the highway. If you are lucky, a hawk will fly across your screen and give you the only filter worth having. They laughed, but not at him. He had made room for them to laugh at themselves. I poured coffee for a man whose knees complained when he climbed my steps. He told Ryan how his grandfather planted windbreaks with a shovel and a horse and then waited 10 years to feel the first real difference. He did not call it investment. He called it patience that pays in shade. Ryan nodded because nodding costs nothing. I watched his face. Something small moved behind his eyes and then hid. Jim folded the map halfway and asked about runoff from the road. I said I had a letter into the county and expected a crew after the thaw. He asked if I had photos of the culvert last storm. I did. I passed my phone and he scrolled with his thumb like a respectful man reading someone else's diary. He handed it back with a small grunt that meant the evidence would help and the county would not enjoy our conversation. The wind lifted 2 napkins and set them down under a boot. A boy from 3 houses down brought Bandit up in a carrier because he thinks neighborhood politics should include witnesses. Bandit stared at Ryan with a look that made 3 grown men step aside. The boy laughed and said he always does that to new people. I told him to let the rooster stretch and find a bit of Sunday. We set Bandit on the tailgate for a minute, and he blinked once and declared himself satisfied with the coffee urn and the cake. He scratched the map edge with a toe and then settled, chest out, like a judge with a limited docket. Dolly asked me about my well schedule and whether I had changed anything since the dry fall. I told her I had shifted laundry days and taught the guest wing systems a stricter lesson than my own. She nodded approval the way a nurse nods when a patient follows orders that prevent worse pain. Jim lifted his chin at Ryan as if to say, "This is how we talk here. You say what you do and why, and then you wait to see if someone else can teach you better." Ryan tried again in a smaller voice. I did not mean to offend. We were thinking about improvements. The word subdivide hung in the air like smoke that took its time to leave. Jim turned the map so the sun did not glare. Improvements happen when the land breathes easier, he said. You do that with rotation, with shelter, with water, not with saws and survey flags. He paused and let Ryan choose a response. Ryan lowered his eyes. The generator hummed its slow, loyal note. I passed plates. I carried cups. I listened to my neighbors audit my character without using that word. In rural life, you build credit with presence, not with plan decks. People notice if you move chairs for elders and refill coffee before anyone asks. They notice if your boots are clean because you came to watch, or dirty because you came from work. They do not gossip about it. They remember and act accordingly when you need help at 2 a.m. Dolly gently cornered Sloane with kindness and asked about her family and whether they had ever seen a winter that takes the breath from your teeth. Sloane told a story about a blizzard on a movie set, and Dolly said a little weather makes divas humble. Then she patted Sloane's hand in a way that felt like a bridge laid plank by plank. No humiliation for sport. Only rough kindness that asks if you can learn. The sun rolled up one more notch and flattened shadows. A soft laugh moved through the group at a toddler's serious face as he tried cornbread for the first time. Jim folded the map and slid it into a tube that had seen more meetings than the courthouse. He looked at me then, as if asking if I wanted a final word. I shook my head. The day had spoken, and I did not need to add weight. He set the tube beside the pickles and clapped Ryan on the shoulder with a hand that could lift an engine block. "You look like a man who could learn fence corners if someone let you try," he said. Ryan swallowed and did not joke. That did more for him than any apology. Plates went light and forks slowed. People began to stack their trash and wipe their own spills, as if the yard were a church they did not attend but respected. A girl tucked a paper napkin under a rock so the wind would not claim it. Dolly wrapped a piece of cake and slid it into Sloane's hand with a nod. The boy reclaimed Bandit, who gave one last side eye to Ryan and accepted a carry back to the truck. The generator hum faded when someone flipped the switch. Silence took its place like a leader who knows when to let the room think. The wind lifted 2 paper plates and set them down in the grass. Gravel clicked under tires as the first truck eased out. Jim tipped his hat toward me and spoke low enough that the porch rail had to lean in to hear. "Call if the county drags its feet. Dolly will drive and I will bring the map." I thanked him without telling him how much oxygen the offer put back in my lungs. When the last plate was stacked and the oilcloth folded, the yard took a breath. Ryan stood alone near the tailgate where the map had been. He touched the metal as if it might cool his thoughts. Sloane leaned against the porch post and watched him like a person who hopes the day found a gap in his armor. I passed the trash into a bag and tied it neat. The house held still and seemed a little larger than it had at dawn. Character equals credit here. You show up with work and someone will loan you their back for an hour when your fence is down. You show up with plans that slice a place into saleable squares, and the room will go quiet until you hear your own shoes on gravel. Ryan had heard the silence. Whether he would listen was his own work to do. The wind nudged a napkin that wanted to run. I caught it and tucked it under the bin lid. The generator had gone from a hum to a memory. The map dust ring stayed on the tailgate as a faint circle. The yard emptied like a tide going out. The air felt clean. I let it pass through me and leave what I wanted to keep. I turned on the power with 3 taps and set the coffee down beside the deed. The house woke without complaint. A low hum in the vents, a steady blink on the range. Morning light pushed a clean stripe across the kitchen table and found the embossed notary seal. It glowed like a coin that had finally chosen a pocket. Ryan stood in the doorway as if unsure the threshold would hold him. Sloane hovered behind him, arms crossed tight, hair pulled into order that the night had not earned. No one spoke. I let the cup breathe. Steam rose and curled and became part of the light. I slid the leather binder open to the first page that mattered. Peter's name sat where it always sat, steady as a fence post. Under it the words that carry weight, whether a person believes in them or not. Hale Homestead Trust, trustee listed as me, successor plan set. Remainder to High Plains Land Conservancy with stewardship carried by a written understanding with Jim and Dolly Dalton. I did not read aloud. I let paper do the work I brought it here to do. Ryan tried charm first. "We were worried, Mom. We thought the power was out. The air felt cold." I kept my eyes on the seal and answered the only part that needed air. "The house is fine, so am I." He saw the top page and flinched in a way only a son lets a mother see. He stepped closer like a man who thinks proximity changes law. Sloane stayed back. She watched my hands the way people watch wind before a storm. I placed a smaller stack beside the deed. 1 sheet of screenshots, not a cascade, not a slideshow. 4 tiles on a single page. Time-stamped calls with a number labeled Development Office. A text that used the phrase soft launch and a string of fire emojis as if heat could be borrowed from a keyboard. An email draft attached to a listing template with my address spelled right and my future spelled wrong. I did not push the page across the table. I let the morning do that for me. Ryan said we were exploring options, family options. We did not mean to alarm you. The sentence wanted to be a blanket. It was a napkin. I lifted my eyes. You negotiated the sale of what you never owned. The words landed and stayed. He opened his mouth to argue and then shut it because the seal was still shining and the power was humming and the coffee was cooling and none of those things cared what he thought. Sloane found her voice before he found his. Small, tight in the throat. You planned this. She looked at the binder as if it were a trap she had walked into wearing shoes that cost a month of feed. I heard the woman she might become if she ever set her phone down near a sink full of dishes. I planned survival. It felt like laying a plank across fast water, plain lumber, no polish. It held. Ryan reached for the screenshots and then pulled his hand back like the paper could burn. His eyes moved across the timestamps and the draft subject line that used words like parcel and maximize. He tried to stand taller than what he had done. Words rose and fell against an edge he had not expected to meet. He steadied a hand on the chair back as if the room had tilted. I turned one page. Trust schedule. Trustee now. Successor trustee named. Remainder beneficiary. The conservancy that understands how to keep a place whole without turning it into a museum. A memorandum of understanding with the Daltons that formalizes what they already live. Check water, fix fence, show up. In exchange, they help the land speak when I cannot. No flourish, just signatures where signatures belong. The notary seal sat in the corner like a sun that does not ask permission to rise. Ryan said, we are family. You could have told me. He meant scold. It came out plea. I looked at him and saw the boy who dragged a rake across the yard and called it mowing. I saw the man who mistook a camera for a friend. I saw the sliver of someone else I had met yesterday when he let Ranger breathe on his cheek and did not step back. Your father used to say paper is the least dramatic way to love people who will not listen. I said it to the room more than to him. The vent hummed. The coffee steamed. The page rested. He tried numbers next because numbers have always been his weapon and his refuge. Taxes, carrying costs, seasonal volatility. He lined them up like soldiers and aimed them at my chest. I did not flinch. The trust has reserves. The easement donation will carry its own relief when the time comes. The Conservancy is not a slogan. It is a ledger and a crew and a phone that answers on bad days. I kept my voice calm. I did not invite him into a debate. I wrote the terms long before this morning. Sloane took one quiet step toward the table. Her eyes stayed on the seal. She said we did not think you would lock us out. She meant legacy. She meant entitlement. She meant a life she had already designed for a screen that would have loved it for a week and then moved on. I did not scold her. That is not my job. The mornings will talk to her if she ever lets them. You are not locked out of being a better person, I said. You are locked out of this deed. That was as far as I would go with mercy in that moment. Mercy without structure fails people. Peter taught me that when his signature started shaking and he still insisted on signing. Ryan placed both hands on the table, palms flat, as if he could warm the wood and change the terms. He asked what happens now. Not loud. Not a challenge. A man at a new edge. Now we drink our coffee. Then you help Tomas with the water check, and you put the halters back where you found them yesterday. After that you drive to town and pick up the mail from the box because the county puts important things on paper. Later this week, I meet with the Conservancy and the Daltons in the small room at the library, and we file the last piece. After that, I stop explaining. The line holds whether you like it or not. He stared at the cup like it could teach him something. Steam curled and broke and curled again. He did not touch it. I turned one more page. The MOU with the Daltons lay tidy and unassuming. It named work. It named gates and pasture rotation, and the sequence for who calls when a calf is in the wrong pasture or a human is. It named nothing a camera would find exciting. That is why it will last. Ryan tried a joke out of habit and killed it before it left his mouth. Good. The kitchen could not hold a joke that morning. I slid the screenshots under the binder and closed the cover halfway, enough to dim the seal and return us to a room where breathing could resume. No gloating, No sermon. Lawful structure does not need an encore. Sloane said, "I am sorry," and looked at the floor. I believed her for the length of one breath. Ryan said I made mistakes. He stared at his hands as if they were new. He did not reach for me. That restraint helped him more than any apology could. The refrigerator kicked on and steadied. The house found the note it always finds when it is safe. I picked up my cup and took one slow sip. Nothing sweet, strong enough to wake a tired woman. I set it down and turned the binder so the spine faced me again. I pressed it closed. The leather sighed in a way only I could hear. He asked one more question I had not planned to answer. "Does any of it ever come to me?" I met his eyes. "In a different form, if you earn it. Work, study. A period of time with no cameras and no sales language. There is a door. It is narrow on purpose." He nodded like a man signing a document he had not bothered to read until the clerk pointed at the line. We stood there in a silence that did not bruise. Then the house returned to its chores. A pipe ticked in the wall. A hen stuttered in the distance. The day stretched. He asked what he should do now. I gave him a simple list. Halter's back. Water check. Mail. Start there. He left the doorway and the kitchen widened without moving. Sloane hesitated. She said I did not know about the conservancy. It sounds like church for land. She almost smiled. I let the line stand between us like a small bridge. She turned and followed him. Steam rose once more and thinned. I slid the single page of screenshots into an envelope stamped with today's date and tucked it into the binder behind the trust schedule. I placed a paperclip on the MOU, so my fingers would not hunt later when a clerk needed clarity. I left the deed where the light could bless it a little longer. It did not need me to hover. Outside, a faint wind lifted dust and set it down again. Dolly's coffee urn had already gone home, but I could feel her approval in the way the room held firm. I smoothed the tablecloth with the side of my hand and watched the shine on the notary seal fade as the sun climbed. I turned a single page to check the last signature and then let it fall back into place. The motion made a small sound like a door closing gently. I picked up the cup. The coffee had cooled to a drinkable truth. I finished it and stood and carried the binder to the shelf where Peter used to keep seed catalogs. Love became plan while he was alive. Plan became policy after. The shelf knew both. I walked to the mudroom and paused by the placard and the board. The rules were still simple and still fair. The boots under the bench waited for the next pair of feet that wanted to be useful. I breathed once and let the house breathe me back. Then I stepped into the day that would run on paper and hands instead of hope. Steam drifted from the cup as I rinsed it and stacked it to dry. A single page turned in my head and settled. I did not cut him out. I wrote him in under conditions. The soil core sample tube lay on the counter where Dr. Piper left it after the survey. A slim cylinder, capped and labeled, a thin column of our ground stacked by years. Dark at the top from last season's grass, pale where a dry summer pinched. A seam of silt where the creek ran wide one spring and told the pasture a new story. I set my palm beside it so my hand would learn its cool weight. Then I slid a folder across the counter until it stopped at Ryan's wrist. He stood straighter than yesterday. Exhausted, yes, but less eager to sell himself an easy plot twist. Sloane hovered near the sink, quiet, watching without sharpening anything. I opened the folder, a copy of the conservation easement, filing receipt stamped and neat, a letter from the High Plains Land Conservancy with 3 sentences I could have framed. The land stays whole, the land stays working, the land stays itself. Ryan read the first page the way a man tastes black coffee after living on sugar. He lifted his eyes. "You already filed." I nodded. "Yesterday afternoon." The clerk said the seal would be on by closing. Jim and Dolly signed their part of the stewardship acknowledgement while the coffee was still hot. He looked down again and traced a line that explains what cannot be divided, built, paved, or otherwise turned into short jokes about long money. He did not argue with the verbs. Sloane broke the silence like a pin gently released. "What does it mean for us?" The us hung there until it softened. I kept my eyes on the tube. "It means the ground will still be ground when your hair is gray. It means winter work earns spring grass and no one can trade that for parking lots. It means any invitation back to this place will not be a conversation about square footage." She nodded without smiling. She understood enough. Ryan set the easement down with 2 hands. His voice had edges worn off by sleep. Do I get another chance? Not another pass, another chance, a different animal. I lifted the second paper from the folder. Not law, a list. You get a ladder, climb it. He waited for me to add sugar. I did not. I pointed with one finger so he would follow the rungs. 2-year agricultural program. Not a degree that flatters a LinkedIn page. A program that teaches soil, water, range management, stock handling, and winter math. He started to speak. I lifted my hand half an inch. When you finish with grades worth showing, you come home to work here. Assistant ranch manager. 5 consecutive years, no cameras, no sales language, hands on gates before sunrise and after supper, all under easement standards, rotation, water discipline, repairs without applause. Reports to me until your work says otherwise. He took a breath he had to earn. What if I fail? Then you get the kind of honest that hurts and heals. You go where your ambition points and you leave the pasture alone. He read the list again and reached for what was not there. Money. Titles. A promise his friends would recognize as winning. The absence humbled him more than any lecture. Sloane steadied a cup under the tap and watched the stream as if water itself could tell her what to do. She asked one question, small and sincere. Who is Dr. Quinn? The veterinarian who mapped our soils with the conservancy team last month. She leaned close to the tube and saw the colored bands. She asked if the layers were good news. I said they were honest news, and that is always good enough to start. I pushed a second paper forward. A calendar for program intakes at the community college and at the state extension office. I had already circled 2 that fit the seasons. He looked surprised and then embarrassed and then something warmer. You expected me to ask. I expected you to need a hand at the first rung. There was no sweetness in my voice, only structure. He reached toward the soil tube and stopped short, like a man asking permission from dirt. Take it, I said. He lifted it and turned it in his hands the way he used to turn a baseball before he learned boys can throw away hours without paying attention. He said it feels heavier than it looks. I said that was the lesson. Bandit crowed once from the far yard. Not the stack of dawn calls, just one clear note, like an approving stamp on a form. Ryan glanced toward the window and smiled without showing it. His shoulders dropped an inch, as if a single crow could loosen a knot. We sat in the kitchen because kitchens know how to hold conditions without making a scene. I walked him through the ladder again, not as a mother talking to a boy, as a supervisor laying out a route. Courses to choose. Volunteer hours that count. Winter placements with neighbors who will sign off only if his hands show up, not his words. A living arrangement here in the barn apartment with rent that will not bankrupt him and rules that will not indulge him. A stipend that recognizes labor without sparing him the math of adulthood. He asked who decides when 5 years have been met. I said the land does, then I do, then the conservancy approves your reports without laughing. He almost laughed at that and then closed his mouth. You are serious. I am fair. He sat with that distinction a long moment, and then nodded like a man learning that fences can be gates if you know where to look. Sloane touched the edge of the folder with 2 fingers. What do I do? Not here, I said. Not yet. But wherever you wake up tomorrow, you can stop letting the internet tell you who you are. She digested that in the way a person swallows medicine they do not like and keeps it down anyway. I placed a pen on the counter and slid a simple form across. An intent to enroll. Not a contract, a promise to try. He read the 2 paragraphs twice and then looked at me as if the pen might tell him what to choose. I will not sign for you, I said. He took the pen. His hand did not shake. He printed his name, wrote a date, and signed with a signature that finally looked like work, not performance. I handed him copies for his folder and one for mine. He tucked his set into an envelope and slipped it into his pocket the way a man protects cash on payday. Good, I said. Return the soil tube to the counter before you forget it is not a trophy. He set it back with care and tapped it once like a superstition he just learned. We did not hug. We did not stage an image. We stood and the room stood with us. I passed him a list of extension contacts and 3 neighbors who have taught more sons to be useful than the high school football field ever did. He read the names and winced at one because he had already embarrassed himself in that yard. Start there, I said. He nodded, which is a better apology than a speech. He asked one more question. What if I change slower than you want? Then you keep showing up until the land believes you. He looked at me like I had handed him something impossible. I had not. I had given him a map with scale and legend and contour lines. The climb would tell him what kind of man he was willing to become. We moved to the sink. I rinsed the cups and stacked them on the towel. He dried without clatter. Small proof, but proof. Sloane carried the last plate to the counter and stood there as if waiting for a bus that no longer serves this route. She said thank you into the air. It landed where it should. Outside, the light shifted to the honest color of mid-morning. The house held steady. The generator was quiet because there was no storm to perform for. I opened the back door and let a ribbon of cold thread its way across the floor. Ryan stepped out and looked at the pasture like a man reading a difficult book. He did not ask how to finish. He asked where to start. In the north field, I watched a hawk ride a clean piece of wind and then fold its wings to drop. The move is not dramatic until it is. The bird disappeared into grass and rose with nothing. Even hunters miss most days. They still ride the wind because that is the work they were made for. Ryan followed my eyes and saw only a blur. Someday he might see the whole sentence. I walked back to the counter and placed the soil tube in the center as if it were a candle at a plane service. The label faced out. Dr. Piper's neat print named our field and the depth. I rested my fingertips on the laminate and breathed. Love becomes plan. Plan becomes policy. Policy becomes an open door that requires boots. Behind me, Ryan cleared his throat. I will call the extension office by noon. I will ask for a seat. I will know by Friday. He said it like a list he could live with. Good, I said. Bring me the name of the program manager. Bring me the dates. Bring me a schedule that spares the animals your learning curve. He tried a smile and almost found one. Then he looked past me at the tube and at the folder and at the empty space where a deed used to decide everything. He said thank you, and this time it did not sound like a trick. It sounded like a man realizing the door is narrow on purpose. Bandit crowed once more from far off, a single note. The wind caught it and broke it into something like a benediction. I held the sound in my chest a moment and then let it go. Repair, not revenge. Entry through work, not inheritance. The rules were simple and fair. The rest was between a man and the mornings that were waiting to write his name in pencil until he earned the ink. At sunrise, my coffee did not taste like payback. It tasted like air. Frost webbed the porch rail. The pasture held its breath. In the barn aisle, the rubber mats were stiff with cold. I slid the stall door, and Juniper swung one ear without lifting her head. Gut sounds thin as a coin dropped from too high. She pawed once, then again. She looked at her flank. My chest went still. Winter colic arrives like a thief who knows the hinges. I set the mug on the tack trunk and called softly toward the barn apartment. Ryan, bring the warm buckets. Now. No hurry in my voice. Just the shape of it. He was there fast. Hair rough. Boots laced wrong. He carried a 5-gallon pail with both hands and steam curled like a prayer. He set it by the door, then the second. He did not ask for a speech. Good. I clipped the lead. We walked. The pre-dawn light was blue and flat. Each breath hung white. Juniper wanted to go down. Ryan kept her feet with a hand steady at her cheek and the strap not too tight. He moved with her, not at her. The difference between control and help. We made slow circles past the feed room, past the placard, past the stack of clean shavings that glowed gold under a single bulb. Call Dr. Piper, I said. Tell her we have a mare restless and quiet gut. He spoke to the phone like a man who knows emergency is a verb. Then he slipped it back into his pocket and returned to the rhythm. Step, step, turn. He offered the warm water. Juniper sniffed and refused. He did not push. He took it away and brought it back. Small patience. The wind found a crack and drew a line of cold down my back. I kept walking. Ryan kept pace. The house light came on in the cottage. Tomas appeared, zipped to the chin, eyes clear. He set the IV pole near the door and checked the time like a nurse with a long day already in his pocket. He said nothing. He waited for Piper. We do not talk much in these minutes. Talking steals oxygen. We watched Juniper. We counted the beats at her throat. We watched her eye for the glassy sheen that says pain is winning. I walked. Ryan walked. The bucket steamed. Every 2 hours if needed. That is the rule of winter and gut. Headlights turned up the lane and ended in the yard like a sure hand. Piper stepped out with her bag in a calm that makes rooms widen. She laid a palm under Juniper's belly and listened with her head tilted. Then she nodded once. Not surgical, not yet. She asked for the Banamine. Tomas brought it. She drew up and handed it to me. I double-checked the label. She smiled a half-inch. Still the accountant. Good. She slid the tube from the bag and warmed it under her coat while she spoke low to the mare. Ryan held the halter. He did not perform. Piper passed the tube. I steadied it. Juniper gave a small protest and then accepted. Mineral oil sluiced like a slow river. Piper's hands were winter steady. We walked again, round and round. The barn hummed with the heat lamps and the quiet of people who know their jobs. Ryan shifted his grip as if he had always known the move. He matched Juniper when she paused to lean against an idea that would make everything worse. No. Keep her up. Keep her moving. He breathed like a man rowing toward shore. The sky lifted from blue to gray. Piper pressed her stethoscope and felt the note change. She tipped her chin. Wait. We waited. A rumble from deep. The sound that turns a spine back to rubber. Juniper blinked and pressed her muzzle into Ryan's shoulder with a gratitude horses show only when the worst has receded by a hair. Piper listened again and gave me a look. We are not out. We are moving toward. Water, small sips, every hour, warmed. Ryan carried the pail like a promise. He did not spill. He did not tell anyone what he was doing. Work done in quiet becomes a kind of heat. Piper wrote notes on a pad and tore the top sheet for my binder. Dosage, times, a line for observation that ended with the words call if she flags. Tomas checked the clock and set his own. Buck arrived and took one lane of walking so Ryan could eat. Ryan shook his head. After the next lap, Buck nodded. The handoff would come when it should. Piper stayed through the first shift. No hurry in her leaving. She drank my coffee with both hands and looked toward the east window like a woman who measures weather and days at once. She set the empty cup on the sill and spoke to Ryan with the professional plane that respects people more than praise. Good hands. Keep them that way. He swallowed. Thank you. No flourish. She smiled a half-inch and packed her bag. At 9, the sun found the ridge and threw a line of pale gold across the pasture. The stall door slid like a soft hymn. Juniper lowered her head to the warmed bucket and drank like a lady at a fountain. She licked. She sighed. She nudged Ryan's coat as if to say that will do. He did not pet her as a reward. He adjusted the blanket where the wind had been rude. He checked the manure fork and tidied the corner because tidying is what you do when the world gives you back what it almost took. We stood in the aisle and let our shoulders drop. Piper's truck was a hum a mile away. Tomas leaned against the door and rolled his neck. Buck turned the lantern down. The crisis went small. The work stayed. We do not forgive once, I said. We forgive daily. He looked at me with the truth of a rough night in his eyes. Like chores. Yes, exactly like chores. We set the schedule. One of us would walk her every hour until noon, then every 2 hours until the edge felt dull. Warm buckets waiting, steaming in the cold. A note on the board. A mark each time she drank. We do not rely on memory when tired. We write the proof. Sloane brought a plate to the barn. Eggs and toast stacked like a sensible prayer. She did not talk. She handed it to Ryan and went to the sink and washed the cups without commentary. She stood for a minute at the stall and let Juniper smell her hands. Then she backed away. Work had built her a little bridge. She did not rush across. By noon, Juniper passed what needed passing, and the three of us breathed like a choir finishing a hard hymn. Ryan laughed once, then stopped himself. I let him laugh the second time. The barn can hold one laugh after a morning like that. The pasture went gold. The cold lost its blade. We hung the lead on its peg. We coiled the line. We put the Banamine back exactly where it belongs. We signed the pad with time so the binder would tell the afternoon what the morning had done. The house wanted sweeping. The porch wanted sand. The mailbox wanted checking because the county cannot put a stamp on grace, but they can send a letter that matters. We divided the list without ceremony. He took the gravel and the box. I took the haul. Sloane took the dishes. Tomas went to check the line at the trough. Buck walked the fence line where ice likes to lie. When the light softened, I boiled water and carried 2 cups to the porch. I set one in the spot Peter favored and one by my chair. Steam lifted and thinned. A glove warmed by my pocket sat on the rail like a small animal resting. In the yard, a child from the Daltons chased his own breath and laughed at the shape of it. A hawk balanced on air and then let the air win. Far-off Bandit offered one short brag, approving, not bossy. Ryan came up the steps slower than when he had arrived days ago. He sat without collapsing. He held his cup with both hands. He looked at the field as if reading a sentence with long words. No camera. No speech. Only a man. And his morning. And the quiet scrape of a chair foot on old wood. He said the line without looking at me. The ranch answers to work, not words. I nodded. He watched the steam and let it wash his face. He set the cup down on the bare spot where the wood-nosed cups live. He stood and went back to the barn without asking for approval. The stall door slid. Breath hung white. The pasture held the last gold of the hour like a low lamp. I stayed. I finished my tea. I left one glove on the rail to catch a bit of Sunday. No victory lap. Only the steady small ritual of letting day turn into evening while a house remembers who it belongs to. The wind lifted and then rested. The gates held. The board waited for tomorrow. I breathed the air that tasted like work and love, and the ordinary mercy of a mare who would eat her hay tonight and blink slow at the sound of a page turning in a binder that keeps us honest. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.